presenting your host for the Racecoin podcast, Jay.
Welcome, Racecoin fans. I'm here with Andy Pilgrim, a veteran professional race car driver. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Jay. Happy to be here.
Yeah, so kick it off. You had an IT job when you first started out to fund your dream. So what moment did you think it was actually possible to transition from having a normal job to becoming a racer?
Well, first of all, economics dictated that it was exactly when I got my job that I thought, you know what, I have a street motorcycle. It was an old Kawasaki 500. And I said, look, I've got money coming in now. I'm going to start racing, much to my parents' chagrin. They were not happy about it. But as soon as I had money coming in, I put my bike on the track. I didn't have a car. I didn't have a trailer. At the beginning, I had basically a buddy with a bread van. And essentially, after his bread van was done, I'd pay him gas money to drop me off at a racetrack. And if I wasn't in hospital, he'd pick me up at the end of the day. I mean, essentially, that's how I started. I just wanted to try racing, and economics dictated it was going to be two wheels to start with.
Wow. So when you say if he wasn't picking you up from hospital, was this common injuries and things back then? Or what was the reason for that?
Certainly facetious, basically, but essentially it was a very dangerous sport back then. In the late 70s, early 80s, the tracks were built more for cars. There was a lot of cheese wire. For instance, Silverstone still had cheese wire on some of the fast corners. A guy, I remember, Ray Hill, went off there and he hit cheese wire. You know, nowadays that would never be considered. So it was a killing sport, and unfortunately, some of my friends that I got involved with racing with passed away. Isle of Man, other races, Brands Hatch, one of them. And I came off occasionally. And when you come off, you pretty much end up going to hospital. But luckily, nothing too bad for me, luckily. But it was a very, very dangerous sport. So it was.
Did you ever feel like I should wait for a little bit longer, accumulate a little bit more money, and then go into four wheels? Like, why straight away, no matter what, I'm just going to go on the track?
Cars was never even a thought in my head because the economics seemed so far out of reach to me. It honestly, it wasn't even on the cards. I would have had to wait till I was 60. You know what I mean? It was like, yeah. I want to start doing something now to see if I'm any good. And I started winning almost from day one in bikes. But 2.5 years later, I got an offer of a job in the United States, and sort of that job may have saved my life, not being,
extreme about it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So you were if only couch surfing was invented back then, right? It would have been a lot easier to, keep that dream a bit.
Yes. Sure. It was totally different back then, obviously. And I didn't have anyone in racing business. My parents obviously weren't anything to do with racing. And I just had a love of it when I was a kid. Anything with an engine and wheels, I was just very interested in my whole life. More cars than motorcycles. But because bikes were cheap, we all had mopeds, and then we had some secondhand piece of garbage that you'd run around on the street. That was you loved it. You loved it. It was just that was where you were. I mean, there was never a thought of cars until, one day I had a secondhand Ford Escort van for 400 pounds, and that was my to tow the bike trailer. Yeah.
Those were the days, eh? So as you mentioned, you went to America and, you had only $106, if I'm not wrong, in your pocket when you walked into that country. So when you say one of the things that's mentioned, in your biography is things that you were so lean on food when you arrived there for the first few weeks.
Yes.
Talk us through that. What does lean on food really mean?
Well, it's simple in a way. I'll explain why. In England, it wasn't the same way as payroll functioned. So if I had a job for paying by the week, I would get a weekly paycheck. And when you start, you'd wait a week. When I got to the States, I'd sold everything, made sure I had no debts when I left, but sold everything. Everything was gone, and I paid off all my debts. And I literally had $106 and nothing. And that was it. And a suitcase, and off I went. But I did have a job. When I got there, I was informed after a couple of days, thinking I was going to get a paycheck. I went into payroll and they said your first payday will be it was essentially 2.5 weeks. And I had $106. And that wasn't even close enough to last me 3 weeks. So I was behind from day one, and I wasn't getting a whole lot of money. It really was very, very little money. It was more than I was making in the UK, but I didn't realize it was very little and almost impossible to live on in the States. So that first year was very tough. I mean, I basically roomed in a house with, several other people. in a really, really dodgy area of town. And, it was interesting first year for sure. And there was no spare money whatsoever. Yeah. Walking to work, it was just, it was just a very interesting first year, but it was very lean, to say the least. Yeah.
I think lean is a very a nice way of putting it, I feel, considering, what kind of experiences you must have had. I mean, is there something you'd like to share from one of them, like a specific day or a specific time, specific moment when you're going home or something?
Not specifically. No, there's nothing specific. I enjoyed my time. It was supposedly a very dodgy area of town, but I didn't know any better. And I was the only one. I mean, these people, thought I had some kind of speech impediment because I spoke more with an English accent, but nobody gave me a problem. We did have some problems in the neighborhood, no doubt about it. On one side of the house was this was an old, big house in an old neighborhood that was in a very bad area. On one side of us was a home for battered women, and the other side was an overflow for a mental institution. That were the two houses either side. It was on Saturday nights, you'd have drunk boyfriends outside the house on one side trying to get their battered wives back. And then on the, you'd have, the ambulances dropping people off on the other side. And it was an experience which I could write a book about. And it was entertaining, to say the least.
Entertaining, that's one way of putting it. So talk us through, like, one thing that obviously becomes very apparent very quickly is obviously now, being a successful racer to where you were back then. Happiness is something that is discussed quite a lot in 2019. So talk us through what differences there were in terms of how you felt back then in terms of just being happy, and now you have more. Can you discuss the differences between the two and the experiences of both sides?
I think in the terms of pure happiness, I'd always dreamed since I was very young, because I had a friend who was 10 years older than me growing up, who went to the States young. And I had admired, this guy. I looked up to this guy. He was a very successful guy. I ended up working for Laker Airways, good buddy of mine. And later life, when we were more the same age. But I was 8 years old. I heard his stories of, America and California and sunshine. Well, of course, I'm in England and it's pouring down with rain. So when I'd actually come to the States and understood, I was happy to be in the States, to get this opportunity through computer programming, to get a job in the States. All of that was like a road that I was on. And my demeanor has always been, I'm fairly independent. Obviously, I just come to the States with nothing and knowing nobody. I'm fairly independent. And honestly, what I have has not affected my happiness. It's really the journey that I've been on the whole time has been a challenge sometimes. Starting a business like I have, being in professional motor racing, can be extraordinarily difficult, incredibly stressful. But the highs of winning, the highs of getting opportunities and then winning, the pressure, surviving the pressure, learning from the pressure in racing it's enhanced everything. It's sort of an add-on to what is fundamentally, I'm a happy person. If that's not too simple term, I'm fairly comfortable with pressure. I'm comfortable in adversity because tomorrow it will be different. I'm not a person that will focus on why me or why not me. It's more like, wow, I can enjoy this. I can learn from it. And if I survive it, I'm stronger. But, I haven't let adversities make me bitter. I'm not Mr. Bitterman. It's really, I try to learn from these things.
Yeah.
And so the happiness in general has not been really changed. What's happened is there are more happy moments when you have more opportunities and you actually have maybe a bit more stuff. So you get a new motorcycle instead of just looking at motorcycles in a window going, wow, I'd love to get one of those. And now I have several motorcycles in my garage. And sometimes I look out the garage and remember back and go, and I just smile and say, wow, this is great. I try to appreciate things as I go. So, yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like, there's a lot of moments of opportunity. And you said that, the journey is what's really the thing that matters to you, and it's not so much the things that you have, which is amazing. So when did you actually get that break to have these opportunities? You know, it was back in 1984, if I'm not wrong, but what moment did that really come about?
Well, when you say the brakes are different, right? The brakes, when you buy a secondhand race car, which is essentially what happened in 1984, and I was at Riverside, California, and I was on the grid for my first professional race. First of all, I realized if I'm going to buy a secondhand race car, literally it was $6,500. I had to borrow money essentially to pay for half of it, you know, from a friendly bank manager. And so it was like that moment on the grid at Riverside was like, I'm really going to race. You know, I qualified, I think, 18th out of 51 cars. The race is actually on television, 30-minute race, 50 horsepower Renault Alliances or appliances, as we used to call them. And it was like, there's a moment there where I went, wow, you know, and 2 or 3 guys crashed their cars to the point that was the end of their racing career. And I realized if I crashed the car, that was going to be the end of my career. And I, you know, finishing 9th and moving up from 18 to finish 9th, top 10, I won $500, and I honestly thought I'd won the Indy 500. I mean, the set of tires was $146. I still have the original receipt. And, you know, I slept in the car. I didn't sleep in a hotel because I couldn't afford a hotel. And the fact that I'd won this money, and, you know, it was just astonishing. And those moments, it wasn't really a break. The first break came really in like 1987. I got Rookie of the Year that year in that series, tough series, and I realized I had some talent. The reason I got into racing that way was professional to start with and not amateur, was because I need to know if I'm any good, and if not, I just need to focus on other things in my life. And that's why I went into a pro series, because I knew it was going to be really tough. So I tested myself. I made it through that. But in 1987, I had $3,000 to my name. I'd sold the little old Renault Cup car, and that was the money that I had for that. I put it in 2 race weekends with this team, and that was it. If nothing happened, that was it. That race team, after 2 weekends, the guy that owned the team, it was an endurance race series, right? So you're with a gentleman driver, and you're the sort of, you know, faster driver, whatever, the guy that brought some money in, but in my case, fast. And that money got me 2 weekends. After that weekend, I shook his hand and said, hey, you know, thanks very much. It's been great. And he said, what do you mean? I said, well, unfortunately, that's all the money I have. I don't have any more money. And he said, oh, all right. Okay, fair enough. And I went home. He called me a day later and said, Andy, I've talked to everybody on the team. He said, look, if you can get yourself to the racetrack, we'd love you to race for the rest of the season. He said, I won't pay you anything yet, but he said, prize money at the end of the season, if we've got prize money, which there would be a prize end of fun season.
Of course, yeah.
And we ended up winning. We were 3rd in the championship, I think, that year. And I got, it's like $9,000. I mean, it was like, I won the lottery, man.
Yeah, like $1 million.
Yeah, it was like, that was the break when he made that phone call and said, we want you to come back, and can you get yourself to the racetrack? That was a break. There are other breaks along the way. Like,
of course. Yeah. And it seems like you've really put it on the line, you know?
Oh, that was it. That $3,000. I mean, if I'd made a mistake, crashed the car, we'd had a mechanical failure. We finished both races. I think we finished, 6th or 5th, but there was 100 cars on the grid. I mean, it was a massively competitive series, and it was a series. Firestone Firehawk series back then was the #1 sort of entry level pro series in the United States. And it was very, very competitive. So that was a break, and that was brilliant. And then, there's others. First factory team calls you and says, hey, we'd like you to ride. And it's like you pick yourself up off the floor, Yeah.
It's amazing. It's amazing. And to kind of bet almost all livelihood of your life on a race or on a opportunity is very tough, and you're one of the fortunate people to have obviously not only done that and got through to the other side where you get to experience the glory of it, where it's like you won the prize money, or you're in a situation where they call you back, or given these opportunities, and for a lot of people I'm sure it's not the same thing where they might have staked as much as you have, or maybe more or maybe less, but they're in a situation where hopes and dreams don't always work out,
No, I feel very fortunate. And of course, I was working full time in IT the whole time. And then it was 1989 where I said to myself, because racing opportunities were coming then, and I was racing, 24 weekends a year, not earning huge amount, but let's say I was earning, 60% of what my salary was as a manager at that point in IT. And then I said, I'm quitting. And I quit this job, very, very good job, and took my 20 grand then in savings and started a little IT consulting company. And I owned it, and that gave me the freedom to take more racing, development opportunities, whatever I could there. Well, nobody in their right mind spends all their savings on starting a small company that I owned 100%, and then think that you're going to be a full-time racing driver and business and grow it. It's insane.
Yeah,
but, and that business lasted 29 years. That was my insurance. Because at any moment, I thought, I'm not necessarily going to be a paid race car driver. Lo and behold, more than 30 years later, people are still buying race cars. It's unbelievable, mate.
Yeah, it is. It really is unbelievable. And the fact that obviously, it always comes at a cost of something, right? Because if you're spending so much time on a business and if you're spending so much time racing, yes, naturally other aspects of life are difficult to make time for, because
that's true.
Things are like extremely, extremely time consuming to even be when the top people are doing this full time, you're against people who are doing it full time. So it makes it a lot harder in that sense. But one of the things that you've said is that America is the land of opportunity. And if you're willing to work hard and make the necessary sacrifices, you can go a long way. Now, is that something you still believe in, or is that something that you felt was true back then, but now the industry has changed?
No, I think it's still true. I think absolutely it's true. I mean, if you think about it, I started a business with one person. I just decided to start a business, which I sold it last year, lasted 29 years. That I can still do today. I mean, I have another company that I do, other things through without employees. But I also started a foundation over here as a give back project. I do believe it's the land of opportunity. Absolutely. I'm not saying I wouldn't have got the same opportunities in England, but gosh, it would have been very, very hard. I mean, it just the perception in England was that, nobody's going to give you that shot, or it's going to be different. I just felt that it was different. And I thought, well, I've always wanted to come to the States. Let's see if it is the land of opportunity. I may have been completely naive and ridiculous about it, but it has proved to be for me. And I still see young people trying the same things, and I try to help them. I still advise young drivers, if they don't come from, rich families, or they don't have a personal bank account, sponsor, trust fund, it's essentially, this is a series I'd go in and I explain the way I did it. The Mazda MX-5 series over here is very competitive. But again, the cars are more expensive. You're going to have to work hard, save up some money. But I tell them, I said, I was 27 years old when I got into a race car. And they look at you like, oh, you're a pro driver. I haven't any other pro driver ever in my life that wasn't in go-karts or in a car, some kind of car, at least at 15 or 16. I didn't get in one till 27. And they go, wow. And then I say, yeah, save up, work hard, and then you'll be able to afford your Mazda Miata and maybe a little pickup truck and a trailer. Try it. Don't give up because you're 23 and you didn't get a shot in F1. I talk to a lot of younger guys at a racetrack here. I'm at the NCM Motorsports Park in Bowling Green doing some consulting work here now. I'm in Kentucky now. I'm doing some work branding and things with the Corvette Museum and all that stuff. And that's what I tell these groups of guys that come to the track. Never, ever give up on your dream. I mean, I think I was talking to a 45-year-old guy who's got a lot of talent. He's really quick, does track days. I convinced him, just try some racing. You're not too old. And it's like he's going to try. He's got the money to afford a car, but he thought, I'm too old.
Yeah.
Oh, no, look at me. No, you're not too old. He's in great.
And everyone has their own subjective experience of what they feel is their reason that's holding them back, and I guess you're helping them overcome that. So tell us, is that what the foundation is about as well, or is that something different?
The foundation, I started Traffic Safety Education Foundation when the business was going reasonably well and racing was going reasonably well in the mid 90s. I wanted to do a give back project. My mother and my godmom were always big on just helping people. There was just a thing that was pervasive in the house. We talked about helping people, especially my godmother. And it was like, okay, traffic safety might be a thing. So I started researching it. And it was about I started talking to students in high schools, talking to driver education teachers, started making some educational materials on DVDs for them. Very, very different stuff. And then I also started work with the actual foundation, made it an official foundation, if you like, 12 years ago. And that's one of the reasons I'm also in Bowling Green in Kentucky, is because of that, to try and do a community traffic safety education project here. And my materials are very, very different. Over tens of thousands of driver education teachers in the US are now using my materials in classrooms with students. And I give everything away. It's all free. I give everything away. I give my time away. I give the materials away. And they're using them because they're useful for them. So, and it's for parents. I talk to parents with kids at young ages, explaining when you turn that child's safety seat around to face front, that's when your kid starts learning your driving habits and behaviors. So don't be messing with the phone when your kids are in the car. Very simple message. In America, that message is not, it's a shock to parents. In the UK, you've got such a brilliant driving test over there. Relative to what we've got in the United States, it's different over there. I talked to a traffic safety expert in the UK, it's different, you know. But here, I can do a lot of work here. I can do a lot of things to help. And that's what most of my time now is spent doing that, to be honest.
Yeah, that's amazing, you know, giving back, especially to the community and the people around all of America, you know, it's amazing. And one of the things that over here, I mean, like 60%, I think, fail on their first time round in the UK. So yeah. it is a pretty high fail rate, you know, it's not an easy pass even for most drivers. So,
it's not at all. And here it's honestly, and sadly, it's a joke. Over half the people that get a new license in the United States, which is about 1.6 million a year, they get no structured driver education whatsoever. Not 1 minute. Not 1 minute, mate, and they still pass the test.
Wow.
Difficult that is.
Yeah, I mean,
shocking, right? That is shocking.
It is definitely shocking. And on a more positive note, I think it's amazing that one of the things I found when I was looking into various aspects of your life is that on your website there's so many decades of experience and so many races and so many things that you've done, that to see your racing positions, you actually have a search function in there which allows people to find what you know, what you've done. I mean, normally people just scroll once max and that's it, you know, you're done. But it's amazing to see how much you've done, and you know, to see what a life you've had in terms of the things you've had to go through, to the accomplishments you've had, to now the fact that you're even giving back, you know, so much. So thank you for being on the RaceCoin podcast and sharing your experiences. And
thank you very much. Thanks very much, Jai. Much appreciated.
If you like this episode of the RaceCoin podcast, go ahead and subscribe so you can get notified every Monday when a new episode is out. And don't forget to check us out on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter.